Hey guys, it's Judy from Nutrition with Judy. Thanks for joining me today. While you're here, please make sure to like and subscribe. My name is Judy Cho, and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private practice where we focus on root cause healing, and it often starts with the Carnivore Cure's all meat elimination diet. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dani Conway, who is a functional nutritionist in the carnivore, keto, and wellness space. Dani is the founder of Nutrition the Natural Way. She is a board certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She is a Kalish method functional medicine practitioner, a gut thrive practitioner, and a functional bloodwork specialist. Dani has been in practice for over 15 years and works with the carnivore, keto, low carb space for over 15 years. She runs a lot of tests and makes sure to support the clients in a way that will get them to root cause healing. We talk a lot about a lot of fun things in this conversation, about the questions about carbohydrates for thyroid and hormone function. What is really causing hormone imbalances? Is it ideal to take bioidentical hormones? And if we do take it, in what situations should we even consider it? We also talk about weight loss. There's a conversation always about weight loss versus healing. And we talk a little bit about the nuances of that as well. And we talk about the importance of exercise. Do we need to exercise even on a carnivore diet that shows benefits of weight loss? Lots of these conversations are in the wellness space or in the carnivore space, and we always wonder what is the truth and what is not. And we talk about the nuances about all of these topics. Let's get right into the interview. Hi, Dani. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to get into a very deep conversation about hormones, thyroid, and just carnivore. I know that you and I are very aligned in the carnivore space, and we get kind of deep with our individual clients. So I'd love to just have the people that are listening and watching get to know you better. So if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I'm Dani Conway, and my journey started in 2006, 2007 in the keto low carb space, although I didn't really know much of what I was doing at that point. I did know that I was 65 pounds overweight on a fat-free diet. I had tons of hormone and digestive issues, and I was done with yo-yo dieting. I was done with restricting, 1,200, 1,100 calories to try to lose weight. I would only gain weight. I was done with 3-hour spin classes, multiple times a week, and just a lot of things that I thought were going to help me get to that next level of health that I wanted, but none of them worked. So set me on a path looking for something different. I did have a lot of cravings for fats and protein, but I wasn't allowing myself to eat those foods at that point. So I decided that I would allow myself to eat those foods, and then slowly started to reduce the carbs and get into the low carb sort of space. From there, I learned I had a lot of results. I had some weight loss. I still had some hormone and gut issues, at that point. That's how I got into functional medicine. And then it just kind of transpired after that. My first, I did have a lot of meals that were just meat, but I didn't really know it was called carnivore at that early point in time. My first experience with carnivore was around 2012. If I could share, just after I had breast implants, I did not have a good luck with the initial surgery, let alone what followed after that. But I did have a flare up of some digestive issues, and that's what led me into a lot of bone broth fasting, meat only. Didn't feel well on a lot of the other foods that I was eating that were even would be considered keto. And that was, again, my first sort of introduction into carnivore.
Yeah, and I love that a lot of the information we both share is that, in the wellness space on social media, we love these tell me one size fits all answers of how much meat am I supposed to exactly eat? Here's my height, here's my weight, just tell it to me and I'm going to follow it to the T. But we know when we work very deep with people that are maybe more chronically unwell or have had hormone issues for a very long time or have had struggles with weight for a very long time, that there's no one size fits all. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you have that practice where you know that it's just not a one size fits all answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of my sort of introduction into one size does not fit all was my own experience with trying all of the diets, the counting the points, and all of those other ways of, that other people were losing weight, but not really attaining health. And so when I realized that I didn't fit into any of those cookie cutter molds, no pun intended, right? At that point, I had to do something different, and I had to start experiencing things for myself and not doing the things that, you know, the diet industry was teaching, because that wasn't working. And so then that just sort of transpired into, you know, when I started working with women, and I do work with men too, but primarily with women in my practice, is that there was different, you know, a lot of the complaints were similar, the symptoms are similar, the hormone issues are similar, but yet the approach to help them, what foods were right for them, what balance of macronutrients, how much protein, how much fat they needed based on their activity level, their hormones, their eating history, things like that, that all had to be tailored to the individual person. And, you know, even if I did a certain modality with someone, again, it's that, okay, what in this protocol should be adapted and changed for this person based on what they're experiencing.
That totally makes sense. We have the same struggles in our clientele, but we get a lot of, your stuff is so complex, or it's so nuanced, or it's just a meat diet. It's so simple, you know? So how do you handle that when people say, I don't get it. Why is it so complicated? You just need meat and water and salt, or no salt. But
yeah, so I think that people that need meat and water, that let me say it this way. The people that thrive on just meat, water, and salt, whatever meats that is, whether it's lion diet, just beef, or lamb, or, you know, a variety of meats, they're not going to be the ones coming to us, to me, to us for further help, because they will get the results that they have worked for. And that's fantastic. I always think like it's great because we know the carnivore diet on its own works. It's the next level of either someone who is not achieving results, whether it's weight loss, symptoms, hormones, whatever the case is, or even someone that wants to take their results to the next level and figure out like what if anything is going on under the surface, what could they, you know, make better, what did the doctor tell them was normal, yet they still don't feel very normal. So all of those things I think are part of the picture.
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Let's use macros as an example. I love that when we were talking offline, that we were talking about when we say high protein or moderate protein or low protein, or when someone's like, I eat high fat, and it's like, that's great. But then when you look at their protein, it's like, oh, you're eating high fat percentage wise because you're barely eating any protein. And so your calories are super low still, but it's actually probably not ideal. Do you want to talk a little bit about the macros?
Yes, of course. I just, this is like one of my favorite things to talk about, because it is so nuanced, and I think that's what can make it so successful on an individual basis for each person. But yes, you know, high protein doesn't mean low fat, and high fat doesn't necessarily mean low protein. So in the context of, I know you and I both get a lot of undereaters, especially with diet history, things like that, especially with women. But yes, making sure someone is eating enough fat for what they need and enough protein as far as amount per day, amount per meal, and that kind of thing. So I just think that looking at their activity level, their, you know, height, weight, like their stats definitely make a difference, their hormone status and insulin resistance and different areas to kind of look for a starting point. And then I always tell clients too, even if we start here, doesn't mean we're going to end here. So we might adjust it next week, or we might adjust it in 6 months. It just kind of depends on how things transpire and how, you know, how it goes.
So one thing that I see very common of women struggling in carnivore is that they've been chronic dieters. They have a little bit of excess weight that they can lose. And so they're kind of scared of fat. So they're definitely not, I'm completely fat free, but they still eat the leaner meats. They won't really dabble in the ribeye. And if they do eat the ribeye, they'll cut out most of the obvious fats because they're scared it's going to have them gain weight. And then there's all this talk in the space where it's, if you have fat, use the fat on your body, don't add extra fat. But I know clearly they want to lose weight because we know that some of the fat cells can be inflammatory. So what do you do with someone that's been a chronic dieter? Maybe they undereat calories a lot of times, but then if we're asking them to eat more, it's kind of a fear, and I see it all the time.
Yeah, so I just take like more of a, I guess we could call it technically like a reverse dieting approach, where whatever, like I like to start clients where they are and take them from where they are to where they need to go. And sometimes it can be super slow because working on the mindset of not fearing fat, not fearing food, not even fearing protein, even though high protein tends to be less of a fear, so to speak, than higher fat. But even if it's, I mean, I've had cases where I will have a client add, in extreme cases, like a teaspoon of fat a day, a teaspoon of added fat a day over a period of time. And then we go to a tablespoon, and then we go to 2 tablespoons. So I like to address the fear slowly so that it's not scary, so that they can really see that it, can slowly benefit them. They're not going to gain tons of weight by just going like stuffing themselves, because I think that's a terrible, a terrible recommendation. And then just kind of slowly work with them to get them to where they need to go, especially if their body is used to, that 1200, seems like that 1200 calorie mark. I swear it's like the magic dieting number from like, years ago, but to take them from that, 11,000 to 1200 calorie mark, and then move them up to, wherever it needs to be, whether it's 1700, 1800, 2000, etc.
Yeah, I had a recent client that she has been trying to do carnivore for a very long time, but it's just unsustainable for her, meaning that I think she just gets sick of the meat, or maybe it was the macros, but eventually she'd go back to whatever diet she's doing and then eventually binge off other foods. So I said to her, and so I looked at her macros she was eating. I think it was 1200. Maybe it's 1400 too. I feel like that's another magical number, but 12, 1400. And she was only trying to eat beef because that was the perfect way to do carnivore. And I said, look, you don't really have many sensitivities. Your primary thing is to lose weight. So let's just leave in a few vegetables that make you feel you have variety, whether it's a pickle, an onion, I don't really care. And let's get your protein macros up in fat. And so her calories were around 16, 17, maybe 18. And it scared her. But I said, just trust me for 2 weeks. And so in 2 weeks, she didn't really lose weight, but she didn't gain weight, and she felt more satisfied. And so that was that trust factor, the letting go of fear. So I completely agree with that. So as we're talking about, the biggest struggle is always people want to lose weight, but then they want to also balance hormones. We hear a lot of fear mongering of our community of, if you eat carnivore or keto, there goes your thyroid hormones, there goes your sex hormones. So how do we balance? Okay, we acknowledge there's some weight that needs to be lost. And again, fat cells can be inflammatory, but also try to lose weight, but then also make sure that you're supporting your hormone function.
So I feel like for me, it goes back to getting them to eat enough as like a baseline. So I really see food as a foundation for everything we do. If food isn't right, hormones aren't going to be balanced, gut health isn't going to be right, the list goes on. So I feel like starting them working towards that, how do I want to call it? Higher amount of food, macros, energy, however you want to describe it. And then kind of working with them on some of the lifestyle habits and the sleep and the other stuff, and helping them realize that this way of eating and this way of approaching things is not what got them into the thyroid pickle, no pun intended, or the adrenal issues or whatever hormone stuff is going on to begin with. And if maybe if someone had been doing carnivore for 10 years and could clearly show me that at the beginning of their carnivore journey, their thyroid was perfect, and then they did everything over 10 years, and then at the end it was, the thyroid went awry, okay, then maybe I'd entertain that. No one size fits all. So maybe some do need a pickle or an onion or whatever here and there. And I definitely am all about sustainability and results. So number one, what's going to get someone the results that they're looking for? And number two, what is sustainable? So if they honestly feel, and I'm sure carnivores aren't going to like to hear this, but if they honestly feel that carnivore isn't sustainable long-term, well, okay, let's number one, either figure out what is, and let's help them get healthy that way. Right. Or let's just use carnivore as an elimination for 90, 120, 6 months, or, whatever amount of days that they need, and then get their body to a place where, okay, now if they want to choose to add back an avocado or low oxalate veggies or something that's makes it feel sustainable to them, and their body can utilize and what do I want to say, not have bloating and gas and constipation from just those few foods, that's great. I'm not suggesting that they should be able to add refined carbs and sugars and, processed foods back in at all.
No, I completely agree. I always try to say that it's not a diet that you're following, but your own specific diet that allows you to have the fewest symptoms, but then
I love
allows it
that.
to be sustainable. And I think that's the win of a diet. And of course, the super strict carnivores don't like that I say that, but I mean, we just work with so many people that are very unwell or have had a lifelong journey of chronic illness or in some imbalance, and you have to meet the person where they are. And some people really want to do carnivore strict, but it doesn't work for their lifestyle for whatever reasons. And then you have to meet the person where they are. And if they get closest to ultimate healing, then how can you say, well, sorry, you still have to eat only meat? It's the onion that you left in that's causing you to be unwell.
Right. No, 100%, 100%.
So I want to go through like one example of a client you work with. I know you do testing and you're a fan of testing, and I am too. And I always try to meet them financially where they are in that sense. But maybe you could walk through, someone comes with either like a hormone, thyroid, it's totally up to you what kind, and then maybe talk through some of the testing you do and why you think it's important to test and not guess.
So one of the main reasons, just to kind of answer the question, that I love test not guess is because a lot of women can present with the same symptoms. And then when we look at their lab work, whether it's their thyroid, their adrenals, even their blood work, their GI, stool testing, when we look at what's on paper, what actually shows up on the testing can be completely different. And therefore, the rebalancing protocol that particular individual woman needs or person needs is going to be different. So when you just go based on symptoms and you start to, guess at what other therapeutic, therapies or supplements or whatever might be needed, you're shooting in the dark. And it does work for some people, but then in the long run, you end up most of the time spending way more money than you need to because you're actually not, targeting what's actually happening. So when I do look at testing, I look at blood work. So comprehensive blood work. It always includes an expanded thyroid panel. I look at multiple inflammatory markers, and then like homocysteine, fibrinogen, CRP. Also, of course, like not only fasting insulin, but leptin and some of the other, adiponectin, C-peptide, because I find that with blood sugar dysregulation, someone's glucose can look normal fasted on the one day that they go get the blood draw. And even sometimes the insulin comes back perfect, but then their leptin is super high, or there's something else that's out of whack, or out of normal, not even optimal, but out of normal ranges. And, those are sort of like those hidden underlying factors that can be contributing to whatever they have, or, whatever the reasons they can't get the results or whatever symptoms they have. From there, also looking at urine testing. So I think you use the Dutch test in your practice. Yeah. I'm also a big fan of urine testing for hormones, looking at, both sex hormones and adrenals, of course, estrogen metabolism as well. And then the stool testing and organic acid. So yes, it sounds like a long list, but I really try to, again, meet the client where they are, look at what they've done in the past, look at, what they could benefit most from, like if they are on a limited budget, like, and they had to choose one test, which is the one test that would give us the most information that I could still help them with a protocol and, look at rebalancing what they have going on.
Do you have a favorite test that you would go to more? I know that's a hard question, but
hard question. I mean, I have favorite tests for various reasons, but in all honesty, I would say that comprehensive blood panel with all of the right markers, only because it can give us so much information in one shot, so to speak, versus having to do a separate hormone test, separate gut test. I could look at areas of hormones and gut and liver and detoxification through the eyes of that one panel. The others, the other stuff is definitely icing on the steak, so to speak. So yeah, I would say blood panel, but yes, it's hard for me to answer that question because, there's nuances, like, even within each person's symptoms that, maybe that stool test is going to be the answer that they need. I'm thinking of one client, this is quite a few years ago, but I had one lady who had nausea and vomiting since she was a child. And the doctors did multiple stool tests and told her, didn't find anything. Did multiple breath tests, didn't find anything. I ran one stool panel and found the problem was a bacteria and helped her eliminate it. And all of a sudden her nausea and vomiting of like 25 or 30 years was gone. So there are cases where there can be one test that's not just blood work that can tell us, what we need to know to get them to the other side.
Yeah, I work with a lot of doctors more recently because of SIRS. And what I find is that no test is perfect. There was an interesting case where the client was very wealthy. And so they did blood work through LabCorp and Quest around the same exact time. So within a span of 2 weeks. And the markers were pretty different on some of the markers. So I learned very quickly, while blood work is super important, and I agree with you, if I had to pick any, I would do the blood work first and then some of the other, because they're more tailored to specific organs. But there's also imbalances in even the lab testing, because it's all human made in a sense, even though they use machines to I guess get the blood work results, but it's just not perfect in any measure, whether it's the stool test or any of the tests. So it has to be the person that presents symptoms, the way they look, and then some of whatever labs that you use. And so I just think that it's knowing what to use when, but knowing that there's always a room for error, because I just feel that people think the test, whatever test, so like the GI map, there's no parasites shown, so therefore I don't have parasites. It's not always true, right? You can have parasites hiding under biofilms and then they may not show up in that one GI map test. So it's just, a doctor recently said, just because a test is negative doesn't mean you don't have it. It just means in that result, it's not showing, which I thought was a very powerful but unhelpful recommendation. But
yeah, no. And one of the most common questions I get, and I know that this is almost fear-based from some women, which I completely understand, is what if I do all this testing and we don't find anything, or it comes back normal?
Right.
And I tell them, in 16 years, I have not yet had any testing from any client who has the similar symptoms or similar complaints come back normal. I'm always looking for optimal, not normal, number one. But it just goes to show you that there can be so much under the surface when their doctors have said, everything's normal, you're good, it's all in your head, you just can take this antidepressant because, whatever. And I think that, that's important too, to just continue to uncover the what's at the surface.
No, that's good. What are your thoughts about HRTs? Do you recommend them ever? And then beyond that, anyone that's on HRTs or even thyroid medications, do you see improvements once they change the diet?
Yes. So let me, I'll answer the hormone replacement question first, because I love this question. So I fall in the middle between hormone replacement is terrible and hormone replacement is the best thing that you could ever do for yourself. And the reason for that is because I see there's a lot of women that benefit from, and when I say HRT, I'm sure when you say it too, I'm referring to BHRT, so bioidentical hormone replacement. I see a lot of women that benefit tremendously from the bioidentical replacement. I also see a lot of women who go on replacement and they crash a week or two after they go on it. The doctor isn't managing their dosages. The doctor isn't testing them before they put them on whatever therapy it is. I actually just had a recent client where we ran a Dutch test and she's been on some replacement therapy and her estrogen is off the charts. Her 4OH is, super high. It's just not being watched. And so I think, and I feel that if we address all the other things first, the diet, the macros, the protein, the fat, getting enough of those foods that are the backbone to our hormones, we make sure that they're not deficient in B vitamins and magnesium, and work on all those, the gut and the absorption of those nutrients, whether it's, of course, through food, but also maybe some use of supplementation. Then at that point, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months down the road, if they are still struggling with hormone symptoms, especially sleep, I think at that point, bioidenticals can be entertained and looked at if the herbal type supports haven't gotten them where they want to be. Would I ever recommend that someone go straight to bioidenticals right off the bat? No way. Never. And that's just me, because I think that food first always, getting the right nutrients, working on the gut, making sure they're, all the things. And then if they get to the point where they do need the bioidenticals, number one, either maybe they don't need as much because they've done all this work and they could, be on lower amounts, or, the herbals, whatever herbal support we've done has actually, has worked. And I've seen that happen as far as not having to go to the bioidenticals.
Yeah, I think that's fair. A long time ago, I interviewed somebody and they said, the conversation was about carbs. So I said, what are your thoughts about carbs? And they said, well, if somebody says that the carbs allow them to sleep better and they're truly getting better sleep, which will then support detoxification and, all the other benefits of hormones and just getting better sleep. Well, then maybe that Band-Aid, even if it is a Band-Aid that it's carbs, maybe it's okay. And that logically made sense to me. So maybe in what you're saying, if someone is not improving enough without the BHRTs and then they want to use it for sleep and that will improve their sleep so that their overall health is improved, then maybe it is a win. So I can see what you're saying with that. I don't really touch it. It's normally that people come to me and they're already on it and it's just, how do I reduce it? Or it's not really, so it's more of that, it's not really helping. We do get some people that say it does benefit them. So we try not to touch that first anyway. So I don't have as much of that, oh, well, you should get on it or not, but we do see low hormone function and we try to fix it with the diet first and then we'll revisit it.
Yeah. And I would say too, in all honesty, the ladies that I get that are already on replacement therapy, when they come to me and they still have a host of other things going on, I will say their cases tend to be more challenging than others that start with just low hormones and that aren't already pushing the bioidenticals or the, whatever hormone replacement therapy into their system. Just to be real.
Have you seen with the diet, do you normally see that when someone's dialed in with their macros or their way of eating on a meat-based diet, them reducing bioidenticals or even thyroid medication?
Yeah, I've seen both, definitely.
Same with us. We see the same thing where we'll see the reduction of medication. Sometimes some people don't fully get off their thyroid medications even on a meat-based diet, but that's just the realities of maybe being on it for so long. And then in terms of thyroid, there's a lot of fear in our community of if you eat this way long term or if you eat low carbs long term, it will absolutely impair your thyroid function and your metabolic health because there are some areas of our body that needs glucose. And so why not just fuel the body with some extra glucose? What are your thoughts around thyroid and carbs?
I just don't see that carbs are the answer to fix the thyroid problem. So I find that there's so many other imbalances that, yes, I uncover that through testing. So I can't just, maybe someone who can't do the testing, they did try some carbs, they felt better. Perhaps that's what worked for them. But just with looking at the inflammation, the advanced hormone markers, things like that, and really working on those things from making sure they're eating enough, getting all the right foods, the right fats, variety of nutrients. I don't particularly see people downslide with their thyroid function once doing all that. I think that there's still, honestly, in the functional space, in the holistic health space, there still is this, everything needs carbs to function, because I see it on some of the practitioner pages that I'm still on. And I just don't see that to always be, to be true in actual practice. I see, a lot of people just really getting to the other side of their health imbalances and issues through this way of eating. And again, I think that if someone's not able to get off some medications, looking at how long they've been on the meds, all of that, those things I think play a bigger role than, animal, meat-based and adding a few carbs back in.
Yeah, I always think about the paleo diet, right? Because that's our kind of sibling or cousin diet. And there's so many people in paleo that they will say they've healed until a certain point, and then they don't feel 100%. So that's why then they dabble in keto, and then some come to carnivore. And I just think that is the perfect diet to look at as samples, or that population where they've reduced most of the grains, they've reduced lots of other foods, and they've even reduced dairy, because for some people, dairy doesn't do well. And a lot of them still struggle with thyroid function, right? So if it was just a carb or no carb and clean up all the other diet, they kind of do that. I know that they do eat veggies, but there are some people that are more meat-based heavy in that community, and there's still a lot of thyroid imbalances. So I think that would be just a very super simple way to think, maybe it's not the carbs, right? Maybe it's something beyond the carbs. And it's I just find it so interesting that people think, no, it's the carbs. And I struggle with, is it a that people just want to eat carbs, and so they're trying to find a reason? Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts with that?
Sometimes when women come to me, they do actually ask me, do I need carbs to heal my thyroid? My XYZ naturopath told me that I did, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if someone wants to have the belief that they need the carbs, then, and it works for them, they try it and it works, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that in actual practice, me and you don't see that to be true. And yes, it can take like a lot of these imbalances can take time. Healing is not linear. It can, you can feel great one month and you can maybe feel not so great the next month because the protocol has changed or whatever you're working on has changed. But I think that, at the end of the day, if someone wants to add carbs, for me, I have them go with animal carbs first, increasing seafood, increasing eggs if they tolerate them, even a little bit of dairy if that works for them. But I'm never, a little bit of veg, but I'm never like the sweet potatoes and some of the other things that are sort of pushed that, oh, at this part of your cycle, you need these carbs. And I don't necessarily believe that, see that to be true. In fact, I had my group program, I did the session last night. We talked about like cycling with workouts and food and macros and different things throughout the hormone cycle to benefit what happens with our hormones. And I don't see that the high carbs to be beneficial in that third or fourth week. I just don't think that that's needed. I think if someone's eating enough, getting enough fat, getting enough protein based on what their bodies need, I don't think that bump for carbs is really necessary.
Yeah, I feel that the whole cycling of carbs or eating higher fat versus lower protein, and just because you're more insulin resistant right before you're about to get your period, I think there's some merit to that in terms of the scientific. But most of my clientele, they improve or become more regular with their period, assuming they're eating enough fat and protein and making sure they're nourished. And oftentimes it's, I don't have bloat, I don't have the cramping that I used to get. Oh, I didn't realize like I'm about to get my period. And there's no PMSy type symptoms. And it's just, they're very regular because I, recommend that they track. And there's no this like, oh, I have low energy now. Or sometimes people will say their sleep gets impacted 1 or 2 days right before their period. And then we say, okay, maybe try to increase the fat and reduce the protein by just a little bit. It's kind of a band-aid, but it works too. So but I don't see this need. I've never ever had to tell somebody, okay, you have to do this cycling or seed cycling or carb cycling, because if they're nourished enough, then it's normally not an issue.
Right. No, I definitely agree with that. And I think to touch on what you just mentioned as far as like the insulin resistance piece, I think that if they're eating the week or two prior to their cycle, if they're eating enough, and sometimes, and I do see some women, and this is my own experience too, some months I would feel like all I wanted was steak right before my cycle. And then other months it was like all I wanted was butter or something, a little bit more fatty right before my cycle. So I do think that can shift for one person depending on the month or just based on different individual women. But again, the eating enough, getting enough electrolytes. So I see that as another reason for cravings, that week before. And then B vitamins as well. So even like liver, if someone's strict carnivore or eats liver, I know that liver capsules can be shunned upon, but quite frankly, I hate liver. I won't eat it, but I will do capsules, and they have helped me. Right. So if they didn't help me, I wouldn't take them. But once in a while I do, feel like, okay, I have that intuitive, feeling that I could use this right now. And then I just end up I'll just find myself starting to forget to take them. And that tells me, oh, don't need them. And, I don't need them at this point. So.
Yeah, no. That totally makes sense. I think the more you become in tune with your body, then you'll know when you need it. It's just like how I don't really track any macros or what I'm eating, but I know that I generally eat 2 meals a day. And then some days, if I eat leaner meats, such as like chicken thighs, I notice the next day I want higher fat. And I don't track it, but I notice that. So it totally makes sense. I wanted to touch upon the fat. We talk a lot about our community, heal first. And I know I'm one of the people that say that too. But as I've been in practice a little bit longer, I notice, as I was saying earlier, that fat cells can be inflammatory. There's the adipose cytokines. How do we balance that, the weight loss versus healing? I know you touch upon that.
Yeah. So number one, from an acknowledgement standpoint, many women that come to me are like, everyone tells me I need to focus on healing first, and that they say, don't worry about weight loss. But the reality is, I want to lose weight. I want to change my body composition. I know it's healthy to have more muscle as I am getting older. And, they're literally are almost ashamed telling me these things. And I'm like, okay, first of all, you don't have to be ashamed of the fact that you want to lose weight to get to a healthy weight, a healthy body composition, for long-term longevity, for whatever the reason, bone density, body composition, vanity. Everyone's entitled to their own goals. So I just tried to really kind of balance the healing and rebalancing from the inside out side of things with the, okay, well, what are you doing for your workouts? Are you doing resistance training? Are you doing HIIT cardio when you shouldn't be because your adrenals are, that tanked? So making sure that their protocol and their program from a lifestyle standpoint, exercise, sleep, food, energy, macros, all of that, matches, number one, what they need to rebalance, and number two, their goals, whether it's body composition, weight, etc. I find when those are combined in, where you put enough emphasis on both sides of the spectrum, then I feel like that is the best approach without having to take away from, don't worry about all of the weight loss and body comp stuff only because you have to heal your body. And then they're, feeling ashamed of, wanting to lose weight because somebody in the space said, no, you focus on healing first and, weight loss will happen naturally. Yes, I believe that. And many have heard me say weight loss happens as a byproduct of the body being healthy and in balance. And I do also feel like you're talking about from an inflammatory standpoint too. There is some weight that will need to come off to reduce inflammation. So I think it's a combination and the right balance of all those things together, as long as you're not only focused on the vanity side of things and not only focused on the rebalancing side where you're worried about, someone telling you that thinking about weight loss was bad and wrong, so to speak.
I am feeling that more and more over the years. I think that when a body is, I don't know, like 100 pounds overweight, and then for our practice to say, no, just focus on healing first, it doesn't make sense because part of the healing should also be weight loss in that sense. So I totally agree with you there. It's tricky because in our community, we also have this, I never worked out and I'm so thin now, right? There's so much of that. But I think for a lot of the practitioners or doctors that I've interviewed or researchers, one of the doctors, he has told me in the past that it's very important that we eat sufficient protein for our lean body mass, but the bigger lever is actually movement. And so what are your thoughts about when people say, oh, I don't work out at all and I'm so healthy now because of my diet?
It's one of my biggest peeves.
Okay.
And I will tell you, like years ago when I first got onto social media and I first found Facebook groups and all of that, and I would see all of these posts about, oh, I did the keto diet and lost all this weight and I didn't exercise, it would make my head explode. Now I realized that, like I told you in part of my story, is that I used to do 3-hour spin classes because that's how I thought I needed to lose weight. So I'm not saying that they need to go to that extreme. And if they're doing that extreme, that is not what they should be doing. I think from a health, perspective, and now I think there's more data and information now about muscle mass and bone density and lean body mass for longevity, which I love that has sort of really come to the surface in the last few years. It really just, unless someone is completely sedentary because they physically aren't able, if a client isn't able to do something for whatever reason, then okay, chair workouts, I had one client, she could not get herself up off the floor on her own. That was one of her goals when she started with me, was to be able to stand up off the floor on her own. So I started her doing chair squats with her, supported with her hands up and down out of her chair. That led her to, as time progressed, going to the gym, actually doing her own workouts. Like she would go to the gym with her husband. She would end up lifting weights. Now she's lost over 100 pounds. Her bone mass, her body bone mass has improved, but her body composition has improved. She's, strong. She's getting herself she's getting herself up off the floor. So anyways, to go back to your question, I can't even wrap my mind around sedentary if someone is able to move.
Yeah, I think it's so, I totally agree. I think it's so important that people move. And, when I first started, I bought into that too, of like, oh, you don't need to exercise. And it logically makes no sense, because even from a lymph perspective, you need movement to move your lymphs around and to detox properly. And if you're just sitting all day long or not really moving around much other than the 1,000 steps you do inside your house, you're not going to be as healthy. I think there's a lot of thought, and I'll do the same, where just at least walk for 30 minutes if you can handle that. And if you can't, like, just do some movements, because our bodies are naturally required to move. And again, if in order to really maintain muscle mass, it's not just eating sufficient protein, it's also moving those muscles so that it knows to, support itself. I think of all the people even that are very successful in our space, all of them work out, right? So Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Saladino. And then there's a lot of the women that are very, they lift a lot and they eat a lot of meat, but they also work out a lot. And I think it's not to say that you have to be in the gym or lift that heavy. I mean, I don't even lift that heavy, but I try to go at least 3 to 4 times a week and do movement. And if not, then I walk outside, because I know the importance. And I think from a mindset perspective, as you said, every day you do a little bit more and you see your progression of what you can do. It's like a dopamine effect in that sense, or it just validates to you, oh, I am somebody that can work out. I am somebody that's healthy. I am somebody that can walk to the mailbox, or now I could run a mile, or now I could run a marathon. So that person that couldn't get off the floor now is able to go to the gym. I mean, think of their mindset alone of, my goal to work with you is just to get off the floor. And now they can go to the gym. Like, imagine how strong of a person and resilient she's becoming. And I think that's the bigger key also of working out.
Yeah. And I think that this is another area, if I could just touch on this for a second, this is another area where the carbohydrates come into the conversation of, like, you can't build muscle without carbohydrates. So, we have to look at, what do we need to build muscle? We need a stimulus, we need protein, you need recovery, and you need, salt and electrolytes to help your muscles fire. Nowhere on that list is carbohydrates. And so that just kind of feeds into what we can really do with this, carnivore, meat-based, animal proteins, animal fats, from a dietary, food first perspective.
Yeah. And I'll touch on one other thing that I always hear is, but I feel better. I feel I can lift more before if I eat carbohydrates. And I had a workout guru expert, fitness person, Menno Hanselmas, and he said it's a nocebo effect. So if you believe that you need carbs to lift heavier, it's probably why you can't lift the heaviest amount of weights that you were able to before, because you truly believe, okay, today I didn't eat carbs, so I'm not going to be able to lift more. And so you will then make that a placebo effect. So it's pretty powerful. And I agree. He's not even a carnivore. He's not even for carnivore, but he said himself, there is no true need for carbohydrates. Yeah. So, as we're closing, if you can talk about maybe some of the, you did a recent post on top 5 hormones to consider. And as we talk about, where should people get started with all of this? We shared a lot of nuanced information. Where do you think people should start? And maybe if you could just touch on those 5 hormones that you think are really key to keep in mind while you're focusing on wellness.
Yeah. So let's see. The hormones that I talked about, or hormone areas, I talked about adrenals and cortisol, of course, thyroid, leptin. So leptin is one that really I feel like has sort of, taken the space by storm in the last maybe year or two.
Right.
But there are many times where leptin resistance, so leptin or satiety hormone, I used to struggle with excessive hunger and cravings significantly years ago. And I feel like, there's definitely some cases where leptin resistance actually can precede insulin resistance. But yeah, insulin resistance gets a lot of, focus for obvious reasons. Of course, insulin resistance, and then sex hormones as well. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, they are going to play a role with energy, with libido, with, body composition, building muscle, motivation, well-being, mood, anxiety, depression. So, good mood, bad mood kind of thing. And those are just all the areas to consider as far as, where you can look at hormones. Of course, the root cause of a hormone problem is rarely ever a hormone problem. So diving in deeper into some of the nuanced areas can be really helpful. And I think just starting with, it might sound cliche, but starting with the lifestyle stuff. So food first, really being honest with yourself, making sure that you're not getting some of the things that I think that when people start writing things down, even if it's just on a piece of paper, not even a tracking app, it really becomes apparent sometimes of like, oh, I didn't realize I was getting this much cheese. Or I had someone the other day, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was eating this much nut butter. Those are calorically really dense foods, and they're not great for digestion. So I think kind of looking down some, areas where you might not think that you're getting so much in, foods or whatever that might, not be working for you, that can be really helpful. Addressing sleep, addressing stress management, addressing, even chewing, digestion, making sure that you're eating in a relaxed environment, not running out the door, grabbing your food on the way. Like all of these things can play into all of these areas of hormone health and hormone balance.
Yeah, I think that's so true. People often just eat on the go and then they're not digesting enough because digestion starts in the mouth. And then if people aren't chewing enough or they just have like 3 bites, I eat with so many different people and they're done with their meal like 20 minutes faster than me. And then I wonder, is it because I'm talking? But it's because I chew a lot. I think compared to the average person.
Always the last one done too. That is so funny. I'm like, okay, everyone else is finished. I'm like halfway through my
I really think some people just chew 2 times and swallow, and it's so not ideal for digestion. But I chew for much longer, and I think in our nutritional therapy school they said 20 to 30 times of chewing before. So essentially, you should never need any liquid to swallow
Right.
your food. Yeah.
So do you want to know what I learned? And I actually recently told this to I have a group program going right now, and they were like flabbergasted when I said this. So in my original training, what I learned is that we actually have to chew until it's liquid because of what you just said.
Okay.
But there was no number of times given. It literally was chew your food until liquid so that your body can absorb the nutrients. Digestion starts in the mouth with the enzymes. And for best absorption. And so when I tell that to people, they're like mortified. And I'm like, it's okay. It can take time because it's a texture thing for some people, but just notice. So just do one thing and notice the point at which you go to swallow your food and then realize, could you chew it more? People, that's what I would say is a next step for anyone watching is just notice the point in which you go to swallow your food and then see if you could just chew it a little bit more.
Yeah. I think the food and mood journal thing is so important. Like you said, even if it's on a piece of paper, I know it's a challenge and I struggle with this myself because of my disordered eating. It's kind of hard to write it down because sometimes if I'm trying to hit a calorie need and then if I go over, it's this struggle mentally of, well, now I'm going to get fat or now I'm going, so that's a struggle. But ideally you can overcome that with whatever care you need. But I find so many people that don't realize how many calories they're consuming. I had one client that's what added heavy cream to their coffee in the morning. And they're like, I'm gaining weight for some reason. And so we did their whole, we went through MyFitnessPal and added their calories, and she was eating the whole quart of heavy cream in a day or two, which is like 800 calories. It's like, I think that's the reason you should probably be just using maybe a tablespoon, if that, but.
Yeah, no, something. So, as far as like the journaling, the tracking, and the kind of being triggered, because I have that a lot with clients too. So something that I recommend just for people to become aware of what they're actually getting is something called reverse tracking, where I have them eat what they're going to normally eat based on their hunger, appetite, whatever their normal patterns are. And then either at the end of the meal or at the end of the day, go ahead and just enter into one of the tracking apps or on a piece of paper what they actually had. And that can just bring awareness to what they're actually getting based on what they, whatever their patterns are. And then they can go from there to make adjustments. But that process can take the stress out of tracking, the stress of looking at the numbers. Like, it's not about how much you're eating. It's more about becoming aware of what you're actually getting. For some, they're going to realize they're under eating. For others, they're going to realize they're overeating, and then going from there to make those adjustments to get them to, whatever is the right next step for that individual person.
No, that's really good. I think the reverse tracking helps. I just think of it in my shoes. And I know that if I did that even after dinner, and let's say I was over, I would think, well, I kind of want something sweet. It would just be that rational. And so this is where that whole eating disorder comes in. But I know for myself, if let's say it was an hour after and I could still go for something sweet. And then if I tracked and it was maybe like 50 calories over 100, I know my rationalization will be, well, I already lost today, that type of mentality, and then just go. So I think it's really important to be honest with yourself, and know. So maybe for me, I could have done that right before I went to bed, so that now there's like no way I can go and eat and stuff. So I think that reverse tracking is super smart, but just being aware of, where you are, I guess, in your journey. And if you were like me, you probably need therapy anyway. So yeah. But, thank you so much for all of your content and all of the information. And I love that you go deep with clients, because we need more practitioners like you in our space. If you can tell people where, how they can work with you, some of your groups, and just, where people can find you.
Yeah. So on Instagram at carnivore.keto.fitness. I have a Keto Carnivore Facebook group as well. Working with me, you can contact me through my website, nutritionthenaturalway.com. I have a group program that's 6 to 7 weeks that I run a few times a year. That's called the Weight Loss Accelerator program. And then I do also have my one-on-one practice as well. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll definitely put everything in the show notes, but thank you so much again for joining me today. And it's always a pleasure seeing you.
Thanks so much, Judy. Take care.
Okay, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this interview. Dani is a wealth of information. If you have never heard of her, make sure to check out her content and make sure to consider working with her if you are not getting that proper root cause healing that you are looking for. Dani's goal is to get you to root cause healing just like our practice does. So make sure to check out her content. Know that there is no one size fits all with the recommendations and answers on the internet or in books or podcasts about carnivore. You have to find what works for you, what allows you to be sustainable, what allows you to stay consistent in a diet. And if that means sometimes adding a little bit of carbs, so be it. If that allows you to be mostly meat-based. And make sure to add some level of exercise, as even our lymphs need movement, because there's no pump of your lymphs that will help you to properly detox. That's why when you get massages, they move around your skin and your lymphs, and then they ask you to hydrate because they're moving your body. So if you move a lot, maybe you don't need all of those massages. It's something to just think about when in our carnivore space, we say exercise is not necessarily required, which I think is incorrect. Okay, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat. Take care of your bodies, because it is the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.